by using this weighted sum of pairing, you have an advantage that you can now uh, assign a lower weight value to the sequences which are having more similarity, and the sequences which are highly divergent in your data set, those sequences will receive higher weight values. So you will be scaling up or down your scores based on how much weightage you have assigned to your sequences depending on their similarity. Now, when we do the scoring, I mentioned that you take the values from the scoring matrices. So which scoring or band? So how does it choose? If all your sequences they are in the range of 80 to 100% sequence identity, then it uses the Blossom 80 scoring matrix. If all the sequences in your data set have for 40 to 60% range in this I'm 120, and for the most divergent data 0 to 40. Types of gap GOP, and another is the gap extension penalty, which is the gap. So gap opening, this particular position where the gap really initiates, that is the gap opening position. So that for this position you apply the GOP penalty GOP, whereas for the subsequent positions in the gap, when you extend the gap, then for each subsequent position you apply the gap extension penalty or gap. So the penalty, the way it is calculated is GOP, which is the gap opening penalty, plus the length of the gap multiplied by the gap extension penalty. So GOP, in this case, the length of the gap is 8. So GOP plus 8 into gap, that will be the total penalty score. And these GOP and gap values are available to the user as default values, or depending on the experience and the expertise of the user, you also have the option to modify these values. So as an advice, it is better to use the default values in the first, when you are trying to align sequences using ClustalW for the first time. And as you see if you have some prior information, prior data about your sequences,
हाँ सर BSNL से बोल रहे हैं ना
thus Thus, the log of minimum of n and m, where n and m represent the lengths of the sequences, multiplied by average residue mismatch score, multiplied by percent identity scaling factor. So, all these three different parameters which we had listed in the earlier slide are taken care of in this particular formula. So, you take the length of the sequences into consideration by taking the minimum of the length. You consider the average residue mismatch score which you get from the scoring matrix, and this percent identity scaling factor comes from how much divergent or how much so the initial initial gap extension penalty is calculated as per this particular formula, where you get the gap extension penalty. This is the user specified gap extension penalty, and they multiply it with a factor which consists of 1 plus log of n by m. So it is a log of the ratio of the lengths, and that is how you take the mod of that log and add it to 1, and that factor is used to multiply the gap extension penalty. So you can see here that the ratio will depend on the difference in the lengths of these two, the sequence that you are trying to align. The log, using the log scale, you are kind of amplifying that value, that ratio, and then adding 1 to it, and then multiplying with the initial gap penalty. For which you want to define the gap opening penalty as such. Is there already a gap present at that position? Because remember, we mutations. So you may have a higher rate of mutations in such positions which are hydrophilic and exposed on the surface. And secondly, from the structure point of view, such stretches may be parts of the loop regions or the irregular coil regions in the protein structure. So considering these two properties, they consider whether the position for which you are assigning the GOP value, is it part of the hydrophilic stretch? That means you make it easier to introduce a gap in this position, because in the process of evolution, it is possible that you will have some insertions or deletions in that position, so you lower the gap opening penalty. And on the other hand, if the position is not part of such a hydrophilic stretch, then you use residue specific gap propensity or penalty. And these residue specific gap penalties are again defined in a Fabrikla-Stahl W algorithm, which are shown in this particular slide. So you have in the first column, you have the amino acid residue, and they have those specific gap opening penalties for each residue defined over here. So this is the table which is used by Stahl as a part of the rules to assign the gap opening penalties. So if, for example, the position for which you are trying to calculate the GOP, that is the gap opening penalty, if it is not part of a hydrophilic stretch, if it is not part of already a pre-existing gap, then for that position, if it is an alanine, then the gap penalty that will be assigned will be 1.13 and so on. So this residue specific gap penalties are also used by Stahl in order to calculate the GOP. So this is an illustration of how the gap penalties are assigned by Stahl. On the x-axis, we have the sequence positions in the multiple sequence alignment. You can see that whereas if you look at these stretches, from this gap position, you have up to consider the 8 positions, which is almost up to this particular amino acid residue over here. And if you consider this in this region, as well as in the upstream region up to 8 characters, you will see that the gap opening penalties are very much higher, and that is according to the rule of the cluster W position specific penalties, that within the plus minus 8 residues of an existing gap, you have to increase the gap opening penalty, because if you introduce a gap over here during the alignment, then it is you are inserting two gaps which are very close to each other, which is not feasible generally in the natural process. So in order to maximize the modeling, correct modeling of the evolutionary process, they have defined these rules of assigning the position specific gap penalty. So this is how the gap penalties are handled by cluster. Now, what do you do when you have very, very divergent sequences in your data set? When you have these divergent sequences, then the most divergent sequences, that is the amino acid sequences of those proteins which have diverged from each other to a large extent, then they share very, very low sequence identities or similarities. And then these sequences are most difficult to align correctly, because when the sequence has undergone so much divergence, so many mutations, how do you really assign the equivalence when you do the alignment? And that is why it becomes very, very difficult to align such divergent sequences. And therefore, to avoid the errors being introduced in the final step of progressive alignment, what cluster does is, more the divergent sequence, it delays the addition of that sequence in the final alignment in a greater fashion. So more divergence added later. So it kind of delays the addition of such divergent sequences to the final alignment, and that delay factor is a choice given to the user, and it is a cutoff identity actually. So you can decide that, okay, if any sequence from my data set has less than 40% identity with the other sequences in the data set, I would like to delay its addition to the final multiple alignment. And this cutoff delay, the default cutoff is 40%. But you have a choice to change it if you want to, depending on any prior data or any prior information that you have about your data set. So if you know that there are sequences which are less than 30% identical, you can set this cutoff to 30% also. So the advantage of such a situation, such a cutoff identity factor, is that your alignment becomes more and more accurate, because first you want to add the most similar sequences, then a little more divergent, and then last one would align the most divergent sequence to your alignment, thereby reducing the probability of introducing the errors in the alignment. That is a very, very strategic point of view, how the cluster really handles this divergent sequences. And then I would like to, before I really go to some applications of how is MSA used, this is a famous statement by Thomson, Higgins and Gibson. In fact, these are the scientists who developed this cluster algorithm. And what very humbly they have said, that in simple cases, the quality of the alignment is excellent. And by simple cases, I have a very bad cold actually. So, in simple cases, that means when you have a data set which has very, very similar sequences, or sequences having a sequence identity of greater than 50%, then the quality of the alignment which will be produced by the cluster algorithm is excellent. Okay, this is what they have commented on their own algorithm. But in more difficult cases, that means when you have a set of sequences which are very, very divergent from each other. So some of the sequences might be having 50%, 60% or even 80% identity. But there will be some sequences in your data set which share an identity of 40 or 30% or even 25% in the data set. So such cases where the range of sequence identity among the sequences is very, very large, in such cases, they refer to these cases as difficult cases. And in such data sets, the alignments, what they very humbly they say that the alignment gives a good starting point for further automatic or manual refinement, indicating that you should take would represent those regions in the protein which are exposed on the surface in the 3D structure, and then those regions will have again more probability of mutations, and there will be loop regions essentially. So stretches of hydrophilicity are important. Similarly, stretches of hydrophobic residues are also very important because these are the regions which will be deeply buried in the core of the protein. We know that protein structure, the core of the protein structure is mainly hydrophobic because these are the residues which are, as the name indicates, they are water-hating residues. And so they want to hide themselves away from the water environment in which the proteins are present. So hydrophobic stretches indicate those regions which are in the core of the protein, and they are very, very, again, important, these types of patterns for predicting the structures of the proteins using bioinformatics methods. So you can predict secondary structures, you can predict tertiary structures, and such clues which you get from MSA are very important in these methods. Again, those regions where you have the gaps in the alignment, they indicate the positions where you have the loops in the structure and variable regions, like the regions which you find in the antibodies, for example. And another important feature which these MSAs reveal is the covariation. So in a minute I will explain what this covariation means. It is a covariation in two different positions in the sequence, between the two sequences which you are trying to compare. I will explain that with the they have the amino acid mutations which are in concurrence with each other. So if there is a mutation in the position of at this in the amino acid at this position, it will always be concurrent with a subsequent or with a analogous mutation in this particular position. So one mutation here will always induce another mutation over here. So that is what is defined as a covariation in the sequence. So variation in one position associated with variation in the other position is what we call as a covariation, and this particular feature can be very easily extracted from a multiple sequence alignment. And what is the importance of this covariation? The importance of this covariation is that even if these two positions are very distant on the sequence, they are very far apart. If you consider the sequence, like one position might be the 10th position in the sequence, the other position might be the 56th position in the sequence. So sequentially these positions might be very, very far. But the evidence of covariation in this region, it indicates that when the protein actually folds in its specific native structure, during that folding of the process, these two amino acids, they are coming close to each other because of the folding of the protein. They are coming spatially very close, and they have a close interaction with each other. And that is what is evident, and that is the reason in fact for covariation, that if you change this amino acid, then its interaction with this amino acid has to be changed, because if you have a, say, arginine over here, and if you have an aspartic acid over here, then they will have a favorable ionic interaction. So if you mutate this arginine, let us say, to a threonine, then you have to change this amino acid also. You cannot have an aspartic acid over there. You might have to change it to some other residue like asparagine or glutamine and so on, which can form a hydrogen bonding kind of a reaction. So this covariation can be very easily detected through the multiple sequence alignments. So if you see that in several proteins, you have such covariations in several sequences, then that is surely those two positions are structurally very, very close to each other, or in other words, we can say that they are structural proximity positions. Structurally, they are very close to each other. So this feature is something which can be detected only through MSA. and not by any other analysis methods, at least sequence analysis methods, of course. So, some more applications of multiple sequence alignments. They are widely used for phylogenetic analysis, which is in fact the theme of the workshop that you are attending. So how to use multiple sequence alignments as an input for phylogenetic analysis will be explained by Yakov Saifullah. I will not go into the details of that. Then they are also very useful for predicting the structures of the protein, both secondary structures as well as given earlier already. They are of course useful to characterize the novel proteins. So whenever you have a new protein sequenced in the lab and you want to characterize that protein, you want to find out what is the function of that protein, what will be the structure of that protein. So in such kind of studies, you can always align that protein with so many other proteins from the database. So essentially the strategy that you would use is first carry out a blast using that new protein or the query protein and get the significant hits from the blast tables. Extract all those protein sequences which are having the significant e-value and bit score from the blast alignment, and then you take your query protein along with those significant hits and carry out an MSA of that protein. And if you get a good multiple sequence alignment, then you can say that the query protein belongs to a particular family of proteins, and you can assign a function of the other proteins which are already known to the new protein. So for function assignment, for structure prediction, this is a very, very useful strategy. So yet another advantage of having the multiple alignments is that you can make a profile or a pattern out of this multiple sequence alignments, and a profile again is a highly powerful tool. You give multiple sequence alignment as an input to generate a profile for a family of protein sequences, and then that is the entire gene family and not just one or two sequences of that family. As a kind of diagnostic to detect the members of known that assign the functions to the members of the family. You can also derive the sequence patterns, which I suppose as given to me, we are including the patterns from multiple sequence alignments. So these two are again very useful applications of MSA. The databases which contain these protein families, family profiles or patterns are, for example, ProCyte, the PFAM database, which is a database of protein families, in which you have again the multiple sequence alignment. If you go to this database website, and if you search for a particular protein family, it has a utility where it can display the multiple sequence alignments of all the members of that particular family. Similarly, PRINTS is another database of patterns which are derived from the MSA, and BLOCS is a database of the highly conserved blocks extracted from the multiple sequence alignments. So these are the derived databases, as we call them in the terminology of bioinformatics, which are derived from the sequence analysis, and all these are taking multiple sequence alignments as the input in that. On the other hand, if you look at the DNA sequence analysis, you can use the MSA not only to understand the evolutionary relationship between the gene sequences or the RNA sequences, but also for PCR primer identification, which is a very, very useful thing when you are doing the PCRs. You can also identify the sites for mutagenesis, okay, so for site-directed mutagenesis and so on. So various applications are there, even in the case of DNA and RNA sequence analysis. So as a summary, I would like to say that Clustal, it does not use alignment score for the final alignment. So it is a very, very useful tool, a highly accurate tool for multiple sequence alignment of proteins, DNA, RNA. It doesn't utilize the alignment scores purely per se for the final alignment. What it uses for the final alignment is the guide tree, according to which it really would do the final progressive alignment. each pairwise alignment in the cluster is done using dynamic programming. So initial alignments are used using the rigorous dynamic programming algorithm, which is available for the pairwise alignments. This algorithm it uses a lot of heuristics, especially as we have discussed for calculating the gap penalties, gap opening as well as gap extension penalties, and these are mainly tailored to globular proteins. So when you want to align the sequences of globular proteins, they are very useful. There is a graphical version of Plustal which is available, Plustal X, and the web-based version is available on the EBI. One of the sites where it is available is in fact EBI, where you can use this Plustal W in an effective fashion. I suppose in your hands-on session you will be already getting an exposure to the use of Plustal and maybe other multiple sequence alignment methods. So how to evaluate these alignments? Okay, you have used Plustal, you have got the alignment of your sequences, but how about testing its significance? So here are some few tips about that. You should align a set of protein sequences where the structures are known. So it is better if you include some sequences in your exercise, in your data set of MSA, those proteins for which the structures are already available, because it helps you then, as I showed you in the case of the globin proteins, it helps you in mapping the secondary structures and then checking whether those secondary structural positions are conserved in all your sequences or not. And that is a very useful criterion to, if the positions of secondary structures are not very well conserved, then you can say that something is wrong with your alignment. So it's a very good confirmatory kind of test. Of course, you will see little variations in the positions, but they should not be very significantly varying positions. There must be an overlap between the secondary structural positions in the aligned sequences. Then you can also verify your sequence-based alignments by aligning the corresponding protein structures. So for example, in your dataset there are 10 proteins for which structures have been solved, available in PDB. Then you can do an additional exercise of aligning those protein structures. There are separate methods available for aligning the protein structures. They can be used. And these structural alignments also can be compared, because structural alignments also produce, along with structural alignment, they also produce the sequence alignment. So you can sort of compare the sequence-based MSA with the structure-based MSA. So these two tools could be useful. Then you can identify the motifs from the structure alignment, the parts of the sequences which form very well-defined motifs like the alpha turn helix motif, for example, or a Rossmann fold and so on. So identify those motifs and again verify them whether these motifs are conserved. And finally, you can check if the sequence alignment has correctly aligned motifs. So that is how one can verify the accuracy, the correctness of the multiple sequence alignment. Of course, there are some advantages and some drawbacks. The advantages being that it is a very accurate method, it gives you a lot of tools, lot of handles to further analyze your protein sequences. But some of the disadvantages or the drawbacks of the method are that the approach, it works very well when the dataset consists of sequences with small divergence, okay? Smaller range of divergence. When you have sequences which are highly divergent, it may not work so well, it may not be so reliable. So that is one drawback which is associated with any MSA tools, in fact, not particularly ClusterW, but in case of any MSA tool, this has to be taken care of and it has to be remembered. Now, one of the major problems with progressive alignment is the local minimum problem. It is a greedy algorithm, meaning that, as we have already seen, it tries to align the most similar sequences first. So, whatever errors you would introduce in the initial part of the multiple sequence alignment, those mistakes get carried away up to the end. So, that is the disadvantage of the greedy nature of the algorithm, and this is something for which the user cannot do anything much about it. One has to keep this limitation in mind and then intelligently use this method for as many sequences as possible. And that is the only way to check the correctness, essential accuracy of your alignment. So the real problem in the cluster is that errors in the initial alignments, as I said earlier, that get carried through the progressive alignment, and these errors, they are less for closely reflexive, but they increase with the increasing divergence.